And good morning, I'm Chris McCarthy, and I appreciate you joining us here for the final hour of Sunday Brunch. As I pointed out, we'll be here now every Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Sundays. And as it gets warmer and baseball comes in, there'll be some, maybe me getting out of here early for the Red Sox. But until then, I'm glad you're able to join us. In studio, I have my friend Jack Spillaine from the New Bedford Standard Times. Good afternoon, Jack. Thanks for joining us.
The left is in the studio.
The left wing is here in the studio. Jack, you had a very interesting piece on the ongoing latest twists in our commuter rail. Fill in our listeners on what's going on.
Well, we had this very mysterious memo that is leaked to the press on Thursday, and it's all about how Southcoast Rail is going to go through Middleborough. They're going to have 2 trains at rush hour. They're going to be diesel trains. The whole electric train thing is gone. And although if you read the memo closely, they left the door open for that. And they're going to restudy Stoughton. So we put the story up midway through Thursday afternoon. At 9:30 at night, we got a little call from one of the delegation members that the memo was inoperative, and they proceeded to give us the memo from a higher-up person in DOT, the Department of Transportation, and that memo said that there were inaccurate information about this very detailed memo that we put online, saying that commuter rail was going to, the people in the South Coast had waited long enough, it had to go through Middleborough, they were going to study Middleborough, they're going to move the Middleborough station, build a big mega station feeding both Fall River and New Bedford into Middleborough, no Taunton station, and that was all inoperative. It was inaccurate. Wouldn't say why it was inaccurate, wouldn't say what part of it is inaccurate, just that it's inaccurate, and start again.
Do we know who wrote the memo?
Well, the name on it was, what was his name? Paul, was it Mike? The name is escaping me. He's the legislative director for the DOT. So he's the guy who communicates with the legislation. I don't think he wrote it. I think he was the conduit that was passing it. It was addressed to all the members of the delegation. So he's the guy who keeps them briefed on what the Department of Transportation, which has taken over commuter rail from the MBTA, if you remember. So my guess is that I think there's a guy named James Eng who's over him. Who Bill Strauss has said has taken over the commuter rail project. Maybe he wrote it, but he's also the guy who wrote that it was inaccurate. So, think about
bizarre,
it.
Right?
It's bizarre. I mean, because it was so detailed. It was just, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and it's not going to be this. It just seems, how could that be inaccurate with that kind of level of detail? Unless someone from the delegation picked up the phone, pressured the governor, the lieutenant governor, and said, no, you can't do it this way, you have to do this, and whether the legislative director, whose name I can't remember, jumped the gun, or
that happens,
or whether there was pushback, and they said, well, maybe we'll change our mind, who knows, but the train was chugging into Middleborough, but now it's not.
What I found very interesting about this, Jack, is through this whole discussion, for instance, Alan Frawley, who's a selectman in Middleborough, and I grew up with him.
No, Alan.
They have never contacted him, as far as I know, about all these changes they're going to make in Middleborough. He or anybody in the Middleborough government. Lakeville, same thing. I have 2 friends on the Board of Selectmen out there. They have never been contacted, officially about all these movements and things. It seems like there would be more discussion going on with these local boards, shouldn't there?
Unless, as Mark Pacheco says, it's all bait and switch. That every time the project gets far enough along, they actually have to start building something. I think the southern portion is 30% designed now. They actually could do some design and build. Every time they get far enough along that they would have to spend some money, they just do a bait and switch. That's Pacheco's attitude. Pacheco, of course, has a vested interest. He's going to lose the Taunton station if this goes through, so he would criticize it.
Sure. And I don't understand how they propose to get it through the Senate without Mark Pacheco being on board with this thing. I would think that every senator in there has an interest, and nothing gets through if everybody doesn't get basically what they're looking for with some level of compromise.
Pacheco is a player. He's a pretty powerful guy up there. You would think they would need to get him on board. I'm wondering, as we talk, maybe this is what the DOT would like to do. This was sort of like, this is the way we see it. This is what we think should be done. You know, Baker put commuter rail into the DOT, took it away from the MBTA, you know, who arguably had done a horrible job of planning it over the years.
Right.
And maybe this is what the transportation professionals at the DOT would like to do, and somebody jumped the gun, or somebody gave it to a delegation member who leaked it because that delegation member thought it would be in the interest to put out this is what the DOT wants to do.
Right. Well, you in your piece, you point out this could be a trial balloon.
It could be a trial balloon.
To say, does this have any traction? Is this something that's palatable to the people who have an interest here? Jack, I don't think you're in the interest of making predictions, but maybe it's not a great question, but I'll answer it. I'll ask it, and then I'll answer it myself. I don't think it's ever. Do you ever think it's coming? I don't think the train is ever coming here.
As Johnny Cash says, I hear the train coming.
Right.
It's coming around the bend. I used to joke that I was going to take it to my medical appointments when I was old to Boston.
Right.
That's 17 years ago. When I got old, now I am old. I have medical appointments in Boston, and I'm driving.
Right.
So
right.
Whether it's going to come or not, it's hard. Forever is a long time.
Yes.
And it's hard to envision, you know, as the population grows, as 495 and 95 and 93 get more gridlocked and more gridlocked, that you won't have to do something.
Right.
But whether it's going to come in our lifetime, whether it's going to be any of the iterations that we talk about, there really doesn't seem to be anyone in power, either on the governor's side or on the legislative leadership side, that really wants to do it more than anything. The way that Mitt Romney said, yeah, I'm going to do the Cape flyover. I'm going to do it in the first year I'm elected, and you know the people in the Cape are giving me a lot of money. We're going to do the Cape flyover.
Right.
There's nobody like that.
No.
That's it.
No, and I also think you're never going to get it without a significant influx of federal money. You're going to need federal money because the state of Massachusetts doesn't have the money to do this project.
President Trump says he wants to do infrastructure.
Yeah.
Although my feeling is that President Trump wants to privatize infrastructure. That's the way he's going to do it. And I don't really know that because they haven't announced it yet. But there has been some speculation that, I think you're aware of this, of privatizing the some additional lanes in the Southeast Expressway.
Right, yeah, there was a plan. It was floated. I think it's been pulled back, but who knows these days. There's all these things going back, which is why we're talking about it. That they were going to add a couple of lanes, and then those would be surge pricing, so you could take them if you chose to stay on the existing public roads. Fine, it didn't cost you anything more. If you transitioned over to another lane, it would cost you maybe $10 or as little as a quarter to do that. They do it in other states. There's been the idea that there was a plan to do it on Route 3 in the Hingham area as well, to surge pricing. It has worked. I will tell you, McClatchy newspapers, big chain of newspapers, they have documents from the Trump Transition Committee that lists the first 50 projects that Donald Trump wanted to do. I don't know if you saw that are on their infrastructure list. One of them is the extension of the Green Line in Boston out to Somerville and places like that. That's one of them. There's also a road in New Hampshire they want to do.
What? Southcoast Rail is not on there?
Southcoast Rail is not on there, but it's only the first 50, Jack. We don't know what else is on the list. I think there were 500 projects. We got the first 10%.
It's number 399.
Exactly. Or maybe 501. It's just sorry. But I don't think we're ever going to see something until we get a serious federal commitment. 40% of our budget is taken up by Mass Health. Very little, and then you start to talk about servicing existing debt, payroll, all the things that the state has to do regardless. You get very little discretionary money in there, in the budget, state budget.
That's the whole future. Not only that, but the automation of factories where there's not going to be any jobs. Never mind whether you're an immigrant or a born and bred American. What the future brings, how we're going to address these things, but transportation infrastructure is one of those things that has to be done. Mm-hmm. It can be done privatized. It can be done by the state. But you have to have a good economy, you have to have good transportation infrastructure. The population keeps growing. The environment keeps getting more polluted. You got to think they're going to have to do something at some point. I don't know. Maybe they get rid of health care and do transportation, It's hard to, as Republicans are seeing now, they ran for 8 years on jettison Obamacare, but it's not that easy.
No.
It just, the system is complex.
Yes.
And even before Obamacare, there was the free care pool.
Mm-hmm.
The free care pool was made up of hospitals, insurance companies, and taxpayers.
Right.
And when people had no means, then they showed up at the emergency room. We're not India yet. They took care of you. So who paid for that free care? The hospitals, the insurance companies, and the taxpayers. A third is what I was told. And so, that's how we did health care for the indigent before Obamacare. So just jettisoning it, hard to do. I think you get some moderate Republicans in some of the swing states that are pushing back on it now. So I don't know. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
No. Isn't that always the argument, Jack, that someone comes up with a good idea and then tries to figure out how not to pay for it, make somebody else pay for it? I mean, and that's a bipartisan move across the board.
Don't tax me, don't tax let's tax the guy up in the tree.
Right, yes, exactly. You're listening to, I'm Chris McCarthy, you're listening to Jack Spillaine from the Standard Times. We're here on Sunday Brunch. We're going to be here till 1 o'clock. If you'd like to join us, you can at 508-996-0500. We have a lot of issues on the table. Jack has a piece today on the train. I'll be a cynic. It's an election year, Jack. The train rears its head again.
It's a city election year, though.
Well, but I mean, but it's a state. But are they getting ready, as you say, maybe a trial balloon? The camps are getting set for what happens. Are they telling Southcoast, is Baker getting ready to talk more about the train because he's getting ready to run again? That's the first thing I thought of. Is this a trial balloon? When you said trial balloon, I thought, trial balloon for the Baker campaign of some sort, or people in his administration who want to say, no, look, there's new life in the train decision. I don't know. Remains to be seen. But we've seen this before, where political candidates of both political stripes have come down here, told us the train's coming.
One thing is for sure, the Baker administration, unlike the first time Charlie ran, where he was adamantly against commuter rail, the second time he said, I'm going to do it, I just don't know how I'm going to do it, maybe not through Stoughton. My sources tell me that he is in communication with at least some of the delegation members, and whether he ever intends to actually do it, he's at least putting it out that he's thinking of it, thinking of doing it this way, thinking of doing it that way. Maybe that's what you say. It's election year. Yeah.
Well, we know he's in communication because he was at Mike Roderick's fundraiser in Westport, speaking on behalf of him. I like Mike Roderick quite a bit. He's a Democrat state senator from the Fall River area, although he represents Lakeville and Westport. He's from Westport, actually. But Charlie Baker was his keynote speaker at his fundraiser the other night, right after the pay raise. One thing to be friends with the Democrats, I don't know if it's great optics for the Republican governor to be helping raise money for Democrats, but we'll see.
I actually hear a little bit of discomfort on the Republican side from Charlie Baker, particularly from the Trump supporters,
right.
The bathroom bill, a couple of other things. The social conservatives are not entirely happy with him. I don't know if they have any place else to go. It's Massachusetts, right. But if this was the Midwest, Charlie might have a little bit of a problem.
I agree with you on that. You know what's interesting is, for instance, at that fundraiser for Mike Roderick, you had Steve Martin, for instance, who's a city councilor here in Ward 2 and works for Deb Goldberg. I mean, there's a picture of him mugging up with Governor Baker. So it seems to me that Governor Baker's stock is pretty high here in Massachusetts, even among Democrats. If you're an elected Democrat who's looking to run for re-election and suddenly and you have no fear about being photographed with the Republican governor, tells you the guy's numbers probably are pretty high.
Shades of Bill Weld.
Totally agree with you. I think he was in Bill Weld's administration all the way through. It's just like Bill Weld. It's just like Paul Cellucci. And we can talk about that some more. I do see we have some callers waiting here. If you'd like to join Jack and I, you can at 508-996-0500. Good afternoon. You're live on WBSM.
Hello, Mr. McCarthy. Hello, Jack Spillaine. I think what we got to prepare for is the fundamental change on how federal money is going to be distributed to the states. I truly believe that the current administration, along with the Republicans, are going to start coming at us in each and every state with block grant packages that's going to include transportation money, Medicare money, Medicaid money, et cetera, et cetera. And it's going to be a benefit to us in the sense that we do have a governor who's familiar with the healthcare system. How the rest of that dough is distributed is going to be very, very interesting, particularly when the majority of the power is north of 128. So it's going to be incumbent upon us to keep our representatives on target in terms of what the city particularly receives and how it is returned to us in the form of cherry sheet if they continue with that mode of transfer. But we're going to certainly see a lot of changes in terms of how finances come to the state. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. I think that that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, the devil is in the details on that big time as to what happens. But changes is certainly coming. I think Baker is a good steward of the taxpayers' money. At least it seems so, this raise aside. But, Tom, let me ask you, how do you think it'll affect the city of New Bedford?
Well, we rely so heavily, for example, on education money that comes by way of the federal government to the state, to us, and it's all designed by formula. Now, if the block grant package comes in with other, how should I say, policy changes, particularly if the lady gets nominated, where voucher programs become the dominant theme, and that money can only be used for vouchers or whatever, and we've already said we don't want that, then it's going to be up to the governor to make sure and ensure that our public school system is funded correctly, notwithstanding those type of federal attributes. But, one thing I will give the current president a little bit of, and I don't give him a lot, believe me, but a little bit of belief is that returning the power to the people, this is one way they're going to do it. I just hope that because of the nature of our representation down here versus Boston, we don't get screwed in the process. Other than that, I think we got to start talking a little bit about the Registry of Deeds person. From what I understood, there are some city councilors that may be interested in getting that, and that should shake up the council in and of itself.
Here's my Tom. Here's my understanding so far, and I don't want to put names out there because I think people have a right to announce, but I think you'll have a former highly elected official in the city of New Bedford maybe in that race, and someone who's a newcomer but from a very strong political family. Maybe, but I think it's jumping in that race. I understand there's some thought that the county commissioners may put in place a placeholder, someone from the office who's not going to run for the job.
I think they like to put in the person who's going to get reelected, the person that they think can hold it, the way they did with Chris Saunders years ago.
Right.
I know there's been at least one city councilor interested in that position a few years ago, and I'm waiting for that announcement. And there may be others because of the nature of the opening and the nature of the job and their skill set.
And by the nature of the job, you mean that it pays over six figures?
that
and it's a 6-year term.
That and those people that may be just about done with their effort in the council and are looking upward, which is fine. I mean, that's part of the nature of the beast, I guess, and it's up to the public to make that decision when the time comes. Versus some of the folks you've been alluding to, if you will. Other than that, I think one of the things regarding the training, because I know that's been the subject, I'm wondering how much political donations our area delegations has received over the last 30 years from all those consultants, for all those planners that we all paid for in their campaign contributions. Anybody ever done any research on that?
Planners for what, Tom?
In other words, we've been waiting 30 years for the train. Many, many times, for example, when Romney was in there, he put up $20 million for planning. Now, somebody got that contract to do the planning. Consultants were hired. So I'm wondering how much money our area delegation folks has received from those folks that had those contracts in their campaign coffers over the last 30 years. And maybe that's one of the reasons why they're so strong on trying to keep the Stoughton route.
It's definitely worth looking into. Looking into the campaign finance reports is always just the most interesting stuff. You find all kinds of strange bedfellows. Tom, while you're on the line, I'd like to ask you about the mayor. What do you think he will do in terms of getting money for New Bedford from President Trump? There was some speculation that he wanted to go to Washington if Hillary was elected, but John Mitchell is a practical politician, if anything, and he has been successful in bringing a lot of money to the city. Do you think he'll be reaching out to Trump, or will he leave that to Baker?
Sure. I think I think once it gets to the level of city government to federal government, it depends entirely on your project. One of the things I looked at is when the Democrats and Republicans made a deal to continue renewable energy tax credits, and the Republicans received the ability to sell that Keystone Pipeline oil out of the country. And that deal was struck, I think it was about 7-8 months ago. So that, for example, puts us in a better position for funding for our energy fledgling wind projects that we have. I don't think Mayor Mitchell has any qualms going into the federal government for additional money for projects that he feels worthy, as I would hope any mayor would do, regardless of who's in office. Sometimes it's figuring out how to play that piano, if you will. And I don't think you're going to see the federal government shutting down places just because they're Democratic. I don't think they'd be that severe.
No, hey, Tom, I agree with you on that. Thank you so much for the call, Tom. I appreciate it.
Yeah, okay.
So, Jack, I happen to agree with Tom on that. I think the mayor's been very he's been smart about this since the post-Trump victory. I would say, hey, let's keep our powder dry. I had him on up in Boston on the station after the election twice now, I think, and both times said, hey, I'm going to wait and see attitude. Let's see what's going on here. I think that, and you and I have talked about this off the air, I think Trump is going to be better for the fishing industry. I think that they can get a lot more out of Trump than they ever would have gotten out of Hillary Clinton, just because the environmental piece trumps, no pun intended, the fishing industry within the Democratic coalition.
Yeah, there's no doubt the environmental lobby is a key player in the Democratic coalition, the way that the Christian right is a key player in the Republican coalition. No matter who is the candidate, has to genuflect to them. So I think I would be flabbergasted if Trump is not better for the fishing industry in New Bedford. We have this new guy down in Woods Hole for NOAA. They say he's more open. John Bullard's going to stay on. Be interesting to see if Bullard starts talking a little bit more pro-industry now.
Has he been invited to stay on, or he wants to stay on?
His position is not one of the political positions.
Oh, okay.
Surprisingly enough, it's a merit position.
Okay.
John certainly knows a lot about the fishing industry and is a smart guy. But my understanding is that he's staying on for now.
Interesting. No, I think that unlike some people who don't want to accept the election, that's not really, and it's shocking some of the people in real serious government positions who don't recognize that the election's over. It's these sit-ins on and this crazy stuff they're doing, not showing up to work, is just counterproductive. I think Liz Warren needs to recognize she represents Massachusetts and not just the left wing of the Democratic Party. We'll see if the Republicans can put up any kind of a candidate against her this year. It'd be difficult, but she got elected in a presidential year. She's running in an off-season year, which is when Republicans tend to do well. Charlie Baker at the top of the ticket, no serious Democrat candidate. You could see where Liz Warren could have a problem. That's not Schilling. It's not Kurt Schilling who's going to give her a problem. Charlie Baker wants nothing to do with Kurt Schilling, I would assume. He doesn't want him on the ticket. But you could see some interesting stuff here in the midterm elections.
Yeah, her numbers are not terrific. I think she might have a challenger. I think that the Democrats right now are sort of where Mitch McConnell was when Obama got elected. We're going to do whatever it takes. We're not going to cooperate on everything. It's no bodies spared. We're just going to oppose on everything. Now, whether they'll stay with that, whatever you want to say about McConnell, I never would have predicted that he could have opposed on everything the way he did. We're just not going to give them one thing, even things we agree on. Obamacare, after all, was really, years ago, a Republican idea. It was, it
was Mitt Romney's idea.
It was Mitt Romney's idea, but
Heritage Foundation. No, I know.
when the Democrats wanted to have single-payer government funded for everything, the Republican position back in those days was to do things like farm it out to private companies, and to have a penalty if you didn't pay, which started with Romney. So I don't know. I think they're in this mode now where it's similar to the Tea Party. You have this grassroots effort. I know a lot of people. The Women's March, I just know so many people that went down to that, and it was organic, whatever you want to say about it. So it's not clear to me that they'll have the ability to stay with it the way McConnell. The Republicans, in my opinion, are just better organized.
Absolutely.
They're just better about designing a plan and staying with it. The Democratic Party still has a moderate wing and a left wing that are not fully integrated. And the moderate wing congressmen and senators have been willing to abandon the party when it's in their re-election interest. So there isn't as much party discipline as there was among the Republicans under certainly under McConnell. The House was a different story under Boehner because he had the challenge from the right.
Right. And they're shorter terms, so it's you get elected and then you're ready to get re-elected. Whereas the Senate, you're 6 years, and so there's more stability.
I will say this: as long as Trump's numbers are low, as long as he's below 50%, there'll be little cooperation because they'll see he's not a popular president anyway. Why should we cooperate?
Provided those numbers, which obviously were not correct in the election, they believe them.
Oh no, the numbers were correct. He lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. They were incorrect in the swing states in the Midwest and Florida. Right. And so everybody prior to the election were following the national polls. She's up by 3%. She's up by 5%. She in the end she won by 2%. The popular vote. That's not what counts. And, and there wasn't enough attention paid to the swing states. So the national polls, as I saw it, were not that far off. It closed at the end, and she won by 2% in the national vote. Right. What the Democrats were not paying attention to, that they needed to, was the game is the swing states, and we didn't have. There wasn't even much polling coming out of Michigan. So unfortunately, and this is what's bizarre to me, because it seems like so many people within the left and the Democratic Party are hanging on to this national vote thing, and it's almost diluting their ability to assess elections, which is that we have 50 national elections, and in 2 years we're going to have. And Trump won the national vote anyway, right? If you get rid of the undocumented. No, I don't think that. I'm saying just from a political mechanics standpoint, you got to look at 50 state elections, and now what you're going to have is Senate elections, and you have Senate elections in many, many swing states. And so it doesn't matter, again, what his national polls are. It matters what his numbers are in Wisconsin, what his numbers are. But his numbers will not stay high in Wisconsin if the economy is bad. His numbers will not stay high if people are afraid of going to war in the Middle East. So those things are. We're going to have to see whether some of the very competent people he's appointed prevail, or whether maybe, my perspective, the Steve Bannons, the General Flynn's prevail, and what kind of administration this ends up being. Because absolutely, it very well remains to be seen what happens in this administration. Just bring it back to the local piece. I had an opportunity to talk to Doug Rubin, who was with he was with Deval Patrick and with Liz Warren, and we're talking about this pay raise issue. And I blame the Republican Party completely. And I've said it here, did it on the Boston radio. If the Republican Party fielded candidates that were competitive, there's no way they would have done this pay raise, because they would have felt like they could lose at the ballot box. Quite frankly, this pay raise was conservative by what they could have done, given the fact that there really is going to be any consequences for this. However, I'm wondering if the potential is for these sitting Democrats to be challenged from the left or just primaried based on this pay raise issue and other issues as well. So if you're a sitting state representative or a sitting state senator, you have no worries of the Republicans, but you do have you may have concerns that someone within the Democratic Party primaries you, because I think we're going to have a very interesting primary season this year. It could be low turnout, activist-driven. You so far have Seti Warren and you have Jay Gonzalez, are the two candidates in the race. If you don't have another big candidate into the race, you'll just have those two, and it could give a big opportunity. And Doug Rubin agreed. He thought the pay raise was wrong, and he thought, it could be the potential
for Democrats to get into this race. And I'm wondering if you think any. I know it's speculative and it's early, but do you see any issues around here where any Democrats could get primaried?
I have been waiting all my adult life for the Republican Party to really make a move in Massachusetts other than the governor's races.
Right.
Even the other constitutional offices, except for Joe Malone, they've never done anything.
No.
And other states across the country, the Democrats have been swept out everywhere. State legislatures, governorships, moderate states in the Midwest, New Jersey. It just hasn't happened in Massachusetts. When Romney was governor, there was a little bit of push when he tried to field some legislative races, but they just have never done it. Now, you have a lot of Democrats in Massachusetts who are Dinos, Democrats in name only.
Wow, I've never heard that before. Did you invent that?
No, but, it's off the top of my head.
Yeah, I like that.
But, there are people that in other states would be moderate Republicans, maybe even conservative Republicans in some cases. They just don't run that way. When I was in New Hampshire, you have a lot of rhinos, people who are Republicans, who are pretty moderate, not averse to spending money on some things. Maybe that's why it just never takes off in Massachusetts, but it just never has. And on paper, it should. I just think talk radio is so powerful now. I think that the internet and social media is so powerful now that we might finally get there. But really, Charlie Baker did not lead much of a charge against it. I didn't even hear much from the Republican leaders in the legislature. They voted against it,
right,
but they didn't do it as red meat the way that they could have. And people say, well, it was a moderate pay raise. It was 40% for the legislative leaders who are getting ready to retire. Now, when you don't get, in the private sector, the dreaded private sector, as Howie Carr would say, when you don't get a raise for a number of years, when you finally do get a raise, you don't get a 40% raise.
No.
You get a 5% raise.
Right, if you're lucky.
So the argument that, well, we haven't had one for a number of years, so now we should get a big one, I just think the public is not that... is not buying it. The problem is the Republican Party is not leading it. So I don't, they're sort of giving lip service. The raise was a bad idea, but not really doing red meat.
You're 100% right about that. No, I don't think the Republican Party is going to make any headway on this. But I do think that there's a potential for, as you point out, the Dinos, the Democrats in name only, maybe the more conservative ones, or the ones who are perceived as, not being receptive to the people. Given the Bernie vote, the Bernie activists that are out there and the Liz Warren people that are out there, that you could see some candidates stepping up and running within the Democratic primary to challenge some of these guys who are sitting there. I think this could be a very interesting year.
It has to happen sooner or later. Sooner or later, the left has to take over the Democratic Party the way the right has taken over the Republican Party. Sooner or later, people have to start voting down ballot the way that they do up ballot. What they say is, we put a Republican governor in to check the Democratic legislature. But the Democratic legislature, I don't know, the last big thing they did was Romney Care. They're really pretty moderate as far as I can see.
Well, they don't, there really is not much discretionary spending left in the budget unless the Republican governor is there to keep them from doing a tax increase.
You know what no one talks about anymore is state pensions. State pensions in Massachusetts are extremely lucrative. They all get it. All the people who are on the elected officials get the same pension. That is one of the biggest budget busters, not only for the state, but it's a big budget buster for municipalities.
And it's totally underfunded, too.
And there's no talk at all, that they're not funding it, and there's no talk at all about reforming it.
It's incredible.
I don't know. I'll probably reveal myself to not be as progressive as some people might think I am, but I think there's just I don't know. There's a lot of deadness in terms of the political debate in Massachusetts. So you really don't get much pushback. I don't think there's. If I had to predict, this is what I think they think.
Yeah.
There's going to be no penalty for this paper.
No, I say that too. That's what I said because as I do, I'm involved with the Boston Herald, and we had on a couple of Republicans on Friday, 3 of them, and one, and of course we had Doug Rubin, who's a big-time Democrat, and I told every one of the Republicans, I said, it's your fault, not them directly, but it's the party's fault by not recruiting candidates. So there's no penalty for this. No one's worried. And that's why I wonder, though, could there be a penalty from the left? Because these districts are done, in many ways to keep Republicans out, and in an interesting low turnout Democrat primary, which is when these races are decided if there's no Republican, you could see some people get knocked out in the state legislature, possibly.
I don't know. I'm going to say something that might get me in trouble. I think the left is dead. I mean, I really, you have Elizabeth Warren, you have Bernie Sanders. There's great potential for the left to be organized, but look at the New Bedford City Council. Who is on the left in the New Bedford City Council? Dana Ribeiro. Beyond that, who is on the left? You're straining. You know, it's hard.
I anticipated Lisa Lemieux, but she dropped out.
But this is a city of 100,000 with 11 city councilors. You would think that at the very least, the left would have 3 or 4 city councilors. They're all moderates, and there's quite a few Republicans, conservatives. So I don't know. I don't see it. Of the legislative delegation, who's really left? Nobody.
Montigny,
Cabral to a certain extent, but they don't really come up with big spending programs that they're sponsoring.
But there's no money for big spending. I hate to. I'm going to get kicked out of the Republican Party, Jack. You and I are going to have to start our own, an independent party here. You're going to get kicked out. I'm going to get kicked out. There's very little discretionary spending left in the budget. Now, as you talk about a dead political debate, where there is going to be, I think, very interesting political debate, and sparks going to fly, are in this Ward 3 special election. We're going to get back to that here in a second. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. You're listening to Sunday Brunch. I'm Chris McCarthy. We have Jack Spillaine from the Standard Times, and if you'd like to join us, you can, 508-996-0500.
Mimosas. Where are the mimosas?
Poor Jack. I tricked him into coming here. He thought Sunday Brunch meant there'd actually be brunch and mimosas. No, there's none of that here. This is a tight budget radio show, but we do have good discussion. If you'd like to join us, you can for the remaining 15 minutes or so. 508-996-0500. So we have been talking local politics. That's Jack and I's passion, is the local stuff. We know it very well. We have this special election in Ward 3. As of last night, I wrote a piece on it. It's up on WBSM.com.
Great piece.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Jack. And it's basically inoperative now because there's been so many changes. And I'll catch the people up on that. So the original list of candidates that I had, now there were more people than this. And quite frankly, I got it from a source, and the elections office was closed. So if you're out there and you're running, please keep running. I'm not doing any disservice. I simply don't know yet. But I will, and we'll get those names into the news department. As of now, there were 8 people that pulled papers. That's what I understand. The well-known people: Kathy Daner, former Ward 3 councilor; Mark Zajac, former ward councilor from Ward 6; Hugh Dunn, who worked for Congressman Keating; Lisa Lemieux, she pulled papers; and Jill Usach, who was on the school committee. And Lisa Lemieux, of course, is a union organizer. And Jack, you know her well. You had she and I in to debate the presidential elections, and I thought it was a nice series, and I was very impressed with her.
She would be a candidate you have to pay attention to, particularly if she got the Coalition for Social Justice, as we talked about.
Absolutely. So the show starts out. I do my monologue, lay this thing out a little bit. Eddie Johnson calls up, who's very plugged in, says the odds-on candidate, even if he doesn't agree with her, is Lisa Lemieux. I say, I got to agree with you. Lisa Lemieux is going to have the organization. She knows what she's doing. She's in. Good candidate, good-looking, articulate. All right. Then Henry Bousquet, who triggered this whole thing by resigning, he calls in. He says, even though he's a Trump Republican and was a delegate to the National Convention as an alternative, he's supporting Hugh Dunn, who is a liberal Democrat.
That surprised me.
Right?
I was driving on the way over, and I heard you say that. I'm thinking, wow, that's
I think it's personal relationships. I think at that level, it's personal relationships. It could be. And he thinks Hugh's the best guy for the job. So, and I like Hugh quite a bit. Then a little bit later, Lisa Lemieux calls in and said, about like 4 minutes later, and says she did take out papers, but she's not running. And she's not running, and she's supporting Hugh Dunn. And I had labeled Hugh an outsider, and what I meant by that was he's the fresh face compared to all these other people who all have fresh faces. I don't mean it literally, but
and certainly he may be a great candidate, but he does not have the name recognition yet that others do.
Exactly. And so I, said I think this is an outsider. She disputed that. She said no, he's very well plugged in, which I laid out. I agree, he's very well plugged in, but she's supporting him, and she didn't say she knew whether the Coalition for Social Justice was going to support him because they're allegedly a Democratic organization. They're going to vote on it.
A Democratic organization?
Yeah, they're a small D Democrat and large D Democrat organization who are going to vote on this, and then they'll find the best candidate. But I think that's been found. Lisa indicated that she'll run at some point. She wants to be on the ballot, and I think she should. So here's where we are. We have a couple of experienced candidates, a couple people who've been on the city council, people who've been on the school committee, new people. It's going to be an incredible election, and it's all going to be organization. Don't you think?
Yeah, and that ward is a funny ward because it runs from Cogswell Street, from some of the poorest neighborhoods, Weld Square in the inner city, all the way up to the high school area where it's very middle class.
That's right. And out to Dartmouth, out to the Dartmouth line, out to the country club.
That's right, with some very nice rental units and condominiums, things like that.
That's
so
right.
it's a heterogeneous ward. It could go either way. The inner city wards don't vote as much as the outlying ones do. All those candidates are strong.
Very strong.
Jill Usack ran citywide,
yes.
So she will have recognition. Kathy Dana represented, I think, for 2 terms, so she'll have her following. Kathy's family, I don't know if you know, is also involved with Greasy Luck.
Yeah, that's her daughter's husband, or son, I guess it'd be her son-in-law is the owner. Yeah,
so she knows a lot of people
Absolutely.
in the city. Hugh Dunn with the Keating connection is certainly credible, and now with endorsements of both Lemieux and Henry Bousquet would certainly be a candidate you'd have to pay attention to.
Have to pay attention to him, and the fact that he was able to get this jump, very interesting on some people. Of course, it depends on what the Republicans do. The Republicans are good at special elections. Jill's on the state committee. You would think she would be able to get Baker down here to support her if she wants him. You'd think she'd be able to get the party to do mailings for her, phone things, all that stuff in Boston that they can do. Because you're talking about, well, look, I think the closest we can look at this, it's a spring election, special election, very low turnout. If you look at 2015 preliminary election, when you didn't have a mayor's preliminary election because there weren't 3 candidates running, you had the turnout in that ward was a joke. The total votes were 550 votes in that preliminary election just 2 years ago.
Do you know if George Rogers or Cynthia Kruger have poll papers? They're in that ward.
They're in that ward. I would think my sources would have told me that. They didn't indicate that.
Because in a very low turnout special election, I remember the special election when Steve Martins was first elected. There were 4 or 5 candidates. Steve Martins was not well known at the time. He was just out of UMass Dartmouth. And he told me, I figured out that if I could get 80 to 100 votes in the primary of the special election, I could make it to the final. 80 to 100 votes. And he said, I had 60 people in my extended family that I knew I could get. And then he went to his friends at UMass Dartmouth. And I think Ken Resendiz, a neighborhood activist, was in that race. He was not the favorite at the beginning of the race. And darned if Steve didn't win that race and been with us ever since.
No, Jack, you're laying out exactly what is going to happen there. It's going to be, now, as you point out, that ward, it absolutely has some of the poorest to some of the best sections in it. It also has, and why I think the casino issue could come up again, it has the 2 locations that in the past have been looked at casinos, Hicks Logan and the municipal golf course. And I think casino is not dead in Massachusetts for southeastern Mass. I think the Indian one is going to go by the wayside, which will reopen the discussion about the southeastern Massachusetts permit.
If I was the Indians and they lose that case, I would just repackage myself and say, okay, we're a private entity now, because they do have deep pocket private investors.
Big time. And
say, we're still going to do Taunton, we'll put that forward, because they have to apply all over again.
Right. Very interesting.
But why would their backers, in particular, drop out?
No, that's very interesting. But it'll start a competitive process that could bring New Bedford back into the discussion. So I think that's an issue that
Eversource plant is still sitting there.
The Eversource is there, but the 2, you have the Hicks Logan, and then the other part too. And you talked about the demographics. You have at least 3 public housing projects in there. You have Shawmut Village over by the high school. You have Brickenwood, which is over by the former Shawmut Diner, and you have Presidential Heights, which is just on the other side of Mount Pleasant Street. And I think you have one up by Nash Road, but I'm not sure if that's just not on the border.
Yeah, Caroline Street might be part. I'm trying to think, is that Ward 4 or Ward 3? I always get confused over by the VFW area.
That's 5 by the VFW. But, again, there's always a line somewhere. Yeah. But just as I was looking at the map and going over it, you have those aspects. Of course, you have Tabor Mills, which is a senior citizen complex. I'll tell you, they're going to be the big beneficiary of this because everyone will go over there and give them free meals as they try to earn votes. So really, Tabor Mills will be the ultimate
beneficiary. Who could deserve it more, the old people, the disabled people at Tabor Mills?
Who then can vote right in the basement. So they don't have to leave home. You know they're going to the polls, Jack. No, if this field stays as it is, if you have 200 committed voters, you're making it into the finals.
Yeah, I think it has to favor name recognition. I just think it's very hard to get a high turnout in a quick election, a special election. People are not going to be voting for anything else. The only people who are really going to turn out are the true believers.
Right.
And so who can get their people in this special election out? I don't think you can handicap it exactly the way you would a mayoral election.
I agree with you. No, this is going to be wild. This is going to be wild. Let's take a call here in the remaining minutes that we have. Thank you for holding. You're live on WBSM with Chris McCarthy and Jack Spillaine.
Well, a lot of people need $21,000, huh?
It's the state of the economy.
Yeah. Joe Usak's going to be the front runner in this race. Probably. Now, who's the candidate? You were mentioning the candidate for social justice.
Well, we don't know yet, but...
Is that Marlene Pollock's people?
Yeah, that's Marlene Pollock's crowd.
Well, they're communists.
That's true. Some of them are.
Going to vote for communism, are they? In New Bedford, they're going to put a representative of the Communist Party on their council.
Well, Marlene served a couple of terms in the school committee.
It's been done.
And by the way, I'm not saying that Marlene is a communist at all.
No, not anymore.
Of course she is. Come on, Chris.
No, hey, I didn't say that. Jack Spillaine said that. You know where I stand.
Chris, come on. I don't want to go there. You know what I'm talking about. You know as well as I do what she is. But anyways, I look for, and don't count Mark Sajak out because he was Ward 6 and now he lives in Ward 3. And, oh, by the way, Caroline Street is not Ward 5, it's Ward 4. And George Rogers lives in Ward 4.
Oh, he's not in 3?
No, they've changed that since they've changed the boundaries.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I would like to see him make one more run.
Who, George?
Yeah.
I don't think you'll see him run.
No.
I think he's 80-ish now.
Yeah.
So my pick is that Mark Sajak and Jill Usak are the two people that'll probably be in the final.
I think those are very solid choices. Thanks for listening. Thanks for calling.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
I don't think you can count out any of the candidates that we've discussed today, except for Lisa Lemieux, who's counted herself out now, because just what you pointed out, it could be is if you can get a pile of votes and hold them together and get them to the polls.
Who's organized? It really is about who's organized.
And the best part, Jack, we get to see it all over again because this is a special election. Whoever wins, well, this is a special election. Then what happens to the camps after that? Who decides they're going to support who or stay out of it and run again in the fall?
And if it's a close race and one person wins by a little bit, you'll have a much bigger turnout in the fall because you'll have a mayoral election. If the mayoral election is competitive, and I know you think that maybe it won't be,
right,
but if it is competitive, there'll be a much bigger turnout, and then you actually could have someone thrown out after a few months.
Yeah. Do you hear any names out there though about running in the mayor's race?
I don't.
I don't either.
But I don't even hear John's name, John Mitchell's name. So.
Right. I wrote a piece on this, I think, on WBSM.com. I think he's running again simply because in the last 60 days he collected over $14,000 from people that are very close to him. And I don't think he would take money from people if he wasn't running for the job.
So if he's fundraising, then he's running. And really, if that's the case, that would mean that Joe Lopes, who is a councilor who could be a serious candidate, will wait. The only person that wouldn't wait would possibly be Scott Lang. I don't know. Scott's in his mid-60s. Does he really want to do this again?
I think Scott Lang wants to do it again. I don't think he gets into the race. I think all the smart money stays on the sidelines, figuring Mitchell is going to run one more time, then he's probably going to do something else.
I will say, if Scott does get in the race, a Lang versus Mitchell race will be as bloody as anything we've ever seen in New Bedford.
Is that all we want for Christmas, Jack? Isn't that what we want?
Political junkies everywhere would be celebrating, uncorking the champagne.
We absolutely are. We're here in the remaining minute or so of the show. I want to thank you, Jack, for coming in with us. You always have an open door here because you're up on this local stuff as much as I am, and we both really enjoy it, and I think the audience enjoys it Jack enjoys it as well. We'll be back here next week, 10 a.m. on Sunday Brunch. I'm Chris McCarthy. You can check out my work on WBSM.com on this race and my thoughts on the previous my thought on the potential for an opponent for John Mitchell, my thoughts on Scott Lang and some of the other candidates that are no longer going to be in the race. I hope you enjoy the football game today, and it's bittersweet.
Go Pats.
Go Pats. And then we have to put the football away, Jack, until August.
Has there ever been another dynasty like the Patriots?
I don't think so. No.
If they win this fifth Super Bowl, it really will put down a marker.
It'll be incredible. Well, folks, enjoy the week. Be safe. I look forward to speaking with you.